We are really delighted, Richard and I, to be here today. We are delighted to be at this conference. I want to thank Gerald and his wonderful Austrian colleagues for all their hospitality and help while we're here. And we feel a bit sort of nervous, having followed two brilliant Bulgarian speeches, and who wouldn't feel nervous? And we have been lucky to work with Jenny and Pavel over many years. And probably one of the greatest honours of our lives, actually, was when Richard and I were awarded. We became fellows of the Union of Bulgarian Mathematicians a few years ago, and we were deeply honoured. We didn't think we deserved it, but we went along with it, and thank you very much for that. So we are, in a way, going to come down to ground a bit, because we are thinking more about real kids in real schools, as opposed to these rather, as opposed to, as well as these rather brilliant people in Bulgaria. So we're going to try and be a bit interactive, and we're going to try not to argue too much as we go along, as is our habit. But this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to try and think about what's changed in the link between programming and constructionism over the many years that's been involved. This will involve looking back, but we are going to look forward as well. We're going to also look at what does it mean to program, and why should we program, and how has it changed over the years, and what the future might bring. We're then going to look at classrooms and constructionism, and can they coexist, because this has been one of the debates that's been rumbling along in this conference, and our answer is yes. And then we're going to look at methodology, and we hope we should be a bit controversial at the end, and pose you all some questions for the future. So, I start by saying what's changed in the link between programming and construction, and this is my question to you, Rich.
Okay, I don't know that this swapping is going to work, but we'll do our best with it. One of the things that's really changed is that when we all started, when people of my age started this trip, programming was constructionism. The only things you could do with a computer were fundamentally boring. I'm told that there was a conference at MIT in the late 60s asking what individuals in their homes could possibly ever do with a computer if the day ever came when people had computers in their home. And some of the most brilliant minds on the planet decided that the most effective thing you could do with a computer was to make a shopping list. And it's true, coming a little bit more up to date, it's true that in the 1980s you had programming as an idea, as an aspiration, and that's why Logo gained hold as it did. And really, everything else was the computer teaching the child, and that just isn't true anymore. And so one of the things we want to think about in this talk is the way in which the whole culture surrounding what it means to use a computer has changed, and what that means for us in educational circles. And you can see it everywhere. The computer we are at this very precise moment making an amazing transition which has gone unnoticed. And you still see the legacy of it. So you switch on your computer, you leave a message, and it says, do you want your out of office memo to be broadcast? How many kids who spend their whole lives online have an office that they're out of, or ever in? You know, it's a cultural relic, it's an anachronism of the past. And now that we have a world in which more and more everybody has a powerful computer in their pocket, the idea that programming is the only means by which you can express yourself in different ways, musically, linguistically, artistically, in all those other ways that we all use computers and our children use computers, the idea that the only way that you can achieve that degree of what we call constructionism in computing is to program is really an outdated idea. So one of the things we want to think about is how the ways in which computers are used in everyday life by everybody now. I heard the other day that the Indians are making an iPad that will cost less than $20. I mean, that's really fundamental change in what I remember Seymour used to say, come back and ask me what we should do when every kid has a powerful computer. Well, you know, let's try and find and think deeply about what it means that every child now does have a computer, but clearly the educational system hasn't caught up with that. It hasn't caught up with it, although I do want to say that we have seen here, one of the really valuable things about this conference is it really does enable us to see what is possible at the leading edge. Mitch Resnick said the other day that we haven't really seen the fundamental shift in what is available in schools. We haven't, but we have seen some magnificent attempts to push in that direction. When Hal Abelson and Andy DeSessa wrote their fabulous book, Turtle Geometry, in 1980 or 1981, Seymour wrote in the dust jacket, this is the first of a new generation of textbooks for learning about mathematics and science, or some words to that effect. And he was nearly right. There are other books in that generation. I'm thinking of Wally and Paul Goldenberg's book about language, Al Cuoco's book about algebra, and Jim Clayson's forthcoming book, which I've had a sneak preview of and is required reading when it's finally published, about the relationship between programming and art, which taught me that if you really want to understand modern art, you have to have some way of expressing the ideas linguistically and programmatically. So Jim, I hope by the time we have our next conference, you'll be giving free copies to me at least for my endorsement. And I should just say that we've seen some spectacular examples of what's possible. Just at the dying minutes of the workshop yesterday, I went to the Minecraft session and watched a 16-year-old boy displaying his work at Minecraft. Really spectacular stuff, but is Minecraft a programming language? Does it pass the test, Brian, for a Turing-complete system? I don't know, let's not get into that, but the idea that the only thing you can do that's constructionism is programming is an outdated idea. You're going to ask me a question?
At the risk of interrupting, I have to ask you a question, because one of the things that we all have, we all teach, we all have a lot of students, we are more in the education side, and they ask, what is this thing constructionism, Richard?
Yes, well, it's funny you should ask me that, Celia. This is an idea by Andy DeSessa which I find helpful and I want to offer to the group. I think it's probably not well known. He makes a distinction between different kinds of theoretical frameworks. He talks about grand theories. Conservation of momentum in physics is a grand theory. You can do a lot with it. If you just know about conservation of momentum, you can predict how things move. But it took hundreds of years to isolate mass and velocity as the key concepts.
And the grand learning theories like Piaget frameworks.
There are grand learning theories. And then there are things that he calls frameworks for action, and he puts constructionism in that camp. Guiding principles that will help you make decisions of the kind, what shall I do next? How does one piece of information relate to another piece of information? That's where he puts constructionism, and he's probably right about that. And that's why it's so difficult for us to answer questions like, define constructionism and tell me how I know it when I see it. Because it doesn't work that way. It's a framework for action, not a grand theory. One of the things that Andy DeSessa talks about is the importance of ontological innovation. As I say, mass and velocity. To have mass and velocity conserved if you multiply them together means that you have isolated key concepts of how the physical world operates. What are the key concepts that isolate how people operate with technology in constructionist settings? I don't think we know very well. And I think that's a task that we should set ourselves for understanding. I think you want to ask me a question now, Celia, don't you? Oh, what does it mean to program on my program, Celia?
Yeah, this is the next. The idea is
This is a really slick presentation.
Yeah. We did practice it after a couple of beers last night, but we obviously lost some of the plot. Anyway, we're going to do a little bit of a historical diversion. The reason being, partly because we've learned so much in projects that we have undertaken collaboratively. Many of them have in fact involved people in this audience. But it's going to look a bit strange and a bit quaint. But we do want to talk about the Playground project. That was in 1999 to 2002. Now the idea was, why that was so important for Richard and me and many others, is we were working with very young children. And so we really had to begin to rethink what programming was. Because these were 5, 6, 7-year-old children. They were not going to program in Fortran. They were not going to program in symbolic languages. So we started to rethink, what does it mean? This now happens all the time, so that the children, when they program, will customize things so it suits their needs. That's really where we're getting to. But we started this journey here in the Playground project because of the constraints that these were very young children. And we actually tried to tap into kids' culture. This was following an idea of Seymour. What was it that somebody said earlier? Somebody's always said it before. I think it was you, Jenny, or Pavel. Unfortunately, somebody has said this before, but we really believed that we had to try and tap into kids' culture. We cannot just keep imposing things on them. To give them the status of producers of video games and not just consumers. I would like to say that in the London Knowledge Lab where we work, many people are doing this now, not from a programming background like us, but much more from a multimedia. But in a way, we started to do it then. How could we help children to program their own games? So they could construct and share, and this was before the web was ubiquitous. God, we had such problems trying to share, when it's all so easy now. But what we tried to do too, and this is the theme that I'm going to keep returning to in our interchange, is what were they learning? We did a wonderful video about, well, what were they learning? They were having a lovely time. They were building stuff. And we all believe that that has a long-term effect on their own identity. But what were they learning? But can we actually be more precise? Because if we can't be more precise, I think we are in a rather shaky position. So we wanted to see about how did children think about creating the rules. These are the rules behind the games they created. They wanted to do something. They wanted to build a game. If that happened, then that happens. Build it yourself. What did they think about this? And we built this on we being a big European project involving the Slovakians and the Bulgarians and the Swedish, and I can't remember, there are other people as well. You know, European projects have a large number of people. But we built it based on 2 platforms. And we can't remember why we actually chose 2. It made it complicated. But it was very fortuitous, because they offered different affordances. There was the Imagine logo, based on the work from Slovakians, and there was Toon Talk, based on the work of Ken Carr, who has actually been demonstrating it here. And they both had different affordances for young children beginning to program. One was much more visual, the other was much more animated, but both were Turing complete languages, although I must say that we didn't use all the functionalities. And I'm just going to say something about the Imagine logo, just very briefly, because it's too much history. But our team did create a video game called Magic Forest, which as far as I understood did very well, and very popular in Portugal, which was that's our other partners. But they could express the rules visually, and you can see those. So that says if you hit this, something happens. So there's lots of functionalities. You could have speech, force joysticks, multi-users. And this was in 1999. And so this was one of the things that they made. They made a video game where you had little rules, and the children made the rules and fitted them together to make a game. So that actually, I think, is very similar to how Scratch works now, in terms of you make something and then you fit it together. There are only certain ways that things could fit together. So it helps the children make the rules. Very crude compared with what's now, but we learnt a lot at that stage. And there was this other playground, the Toon Talk playground, and that's what you're going to talk about, Richard, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, just to make it clear, this is 15 years old, so we're not pushing this as some new piece of research. In trying to put this talk together, which you see is work in progress, we're trying to say to ourselves, what have we learnt about what children have learned from our work with game production? This is a Toon Talk program. I don't know how many people went to Ken's Toon Talk workshop yesterday, but the idea about Toon Talk is that all the source code is animated, so you actually write a program by manipulating stuff. And it really is surprisingly easy to do that. This is an evolution of a game. I wonder if this thing works. Oh yeah, this is an evolution of a game that started this way. And now we would use the language of remixing. We'd say that the kids passed it around themselves, between themselves, remixing it until this thing here turned into this game here. We thought this was going to be really straightforward. We didn't call it remixing, but we know what we mean by that now. We thought it was going to be very straightforward for kids to do really quite fundamental changes to their games. Turned out that wasn't quite true, and I'll explain a bit more in a second. By the way, this is how the game ended up. And it is worth just seeing the affordances here. That says, I move in an ellipse shape. This says, I transfer a blow-up behaviour to something when it touches me.
That behaviour was stuck on the back of the picture.
An interesting thing was that we knew that the kids probably couldn't read those messages, so we had those messages spoken by the computer. And again, we thought that would be really transparently clear to the children, but we didn't really see them using that affordance very much. Before we go on and draw the lessons of these two experiences, we just have to have a word from our sponsor. Every now and then, a kid says or does something that you just want to leap out of your seat and say, my God, I have to share this piece of information. Let's just hope this works.
She was one of our children in the playground.
This is an 8-year-old girl in a school round the corner from the Institute, nothing special about it, ordinary kids from, it's the centre of London, so I don't know how many dozens of languages and ethnicities were represented in that school. It's what the Americans would call an inner city school, which always strikes me as a disparaging thing to say. But we're proud of it being an inner city school. But I don't know how to make it work.
The day I liked was because we got to show each other what we've been doing over the weeks.
Oh, you like seeing what the boys had done, or what? What did you like about what they'd done?
I liked Triton's one because it was interesting and difficult, and it was easy to change.
You see, video director leapt out of his seat and said, "Who told you to say that?" But in fact, no. And we were talking the other day, Celia and I, about mapping those three concepts onto Mitch Resnick's 3 or 4 Ps, but we got lost.
She really was not programmed to say that. We wonder about her now, actually. We wonder, the trouble is with research projects, we no longer know what happened to Ajmina. And I'd love to know, we would have to put up a call on Facebook or something saying, where are you? And she probably, I don't know. I just feel that we thought she had transformative experiences, but we can't prove it unless by chance we come across them.
Okay, but so Celia, maybe you'd like to talk about what they might have learned.
No, actually, the point now is we're going to try and say some things that we are critiquing ourselves from the past. There was no doubt in the Playground project and the Web Lab projects after and many other projects, and many of the projects that I know have been done already. The children or the students made and shared wonderful projects. They had a wonderful time, without doubt, and it was transformative. But can we say anything more about what they learned? And this is something that has perplexed us and challenged us. And we know the issues about paper-intensive tests. We know about school. We know about those problems. Can we try and see what they might have learned? So we certainly in Playground, and since we know that the children could express condition action rules in the programming language, whether it's Toon Talk or Imagine Model, they certainly could read what happened in terms of the formal language. They could make some reading and expressions, and they could debug. If they did 2 things that were conflicting, they could actually work out. Debugging, as Pavel said, was a very powerful thing, and they began to do that. They could make surface level changes, and you noticed in the Toon Talk adventure game that actually it changed, the pictures changed, and they could do a lot of that. They could change the music, change the picture, and in fact, actually our sociological colleagues say that's really important. It changes the essence of the game. But for us who are looking at what did they change in the formal system, they changed rather less of that. So if you've actually found, they rarely change the rules themselves. They mainly change what the rules of the game look like. And they also change, there were some difficulties. These are very young children, and I think it might be something to do with the ideas of if-then logic, which is not straightforward. that even after programming a rule, the children rarely predicted the consequences of it until they saw it. And that's interesting, is how far the reality of the programming language was. So I just wonder, and this I would ask Karen and Mitch, is this an issue in remixing? What are the children remixing? They're changing the feel of the game, they're changing the pictures, they're changing the sounds, but are they changing anything more about the rule system? And what are they learning about programming? This is a genuine question that we want to investigate more. So what did we learn? And of course we learn a lot over the years, and so we wanted to try and say what we learned. We're much more aware of the challenges. I think we've always been terribly optimistic, and I hopefully still am, but I think it's good to be aware that these things aren't as easy as we might have thought. And what are the challenges? There are very conceptual challenges in programming. Let's not forget this, in terms of what is an algorithm. What if then I am amazed in the work I do, Richard will talk about it later, in workplaces, that a lot of people do not predict the consequences of what they do. And it's quite extraordinary. I mean, maybe I'm stupid not to have thought about this. But variables, the idea of variable is not straightforward, and nor is the idea of recursion. Also the importance of what we might call recontextualization, which is when we've learnt in one environment in the little micro-world has to be relearned when expressed in another one. And I think we have to make more effort in forging links between these domains that we didn't do in the past. This is critiquing us. And we also must become more aware of how the functionalities of whatever you can do is so intimately related to what platform we're using. It's quite difficult to be aware. When you're in a particular environment, you are very much learning what's there. And what we really didn't do very well, I think we tried, was how to help children know what's available.
We've made some progress about that.
You want to speak? Yes.
It just so happens that I remember that we've made some progress about that. I mean, we are so in awe of what's happened with Scratch and this remixing phenomenon and 6 million paid projects and so on. But I just wonder, let's make sure, this is a collective challenge to our community, let's make sure that we maximize the possibilities of people actually learning stuff when they're doing that. Because it is really, in no disrespect to the Scratch enterprise in any way at all, it's a magnificent achievement, but it could be even more magnificent if we really craft ways, and Karen probably has ways that she's thought of already that she could share with us. It really is important to say to ourselves, what are the big ideas that kids could encounter by this remixing process? Because if left to their own, there's lots of low-hanging fruit you can achieve by remixing, changing the sound, making the blue bits red, changing the background and so on, which are great in terms of engagement and ownership, but there's so much more that could be done. One of the things that shocked us and really is a massive outcome and a lesson for our community is that most kids only have a vaguest sense of how systems work. This is really serious. You know, there are some huge percentage of people, people, including kids, but particularly adults, it's shocking when you see it in adults, who say things like, global warming is just a question of computer modelling, it's not really happening. And they have no sense of what a model is and what it might take to build a model and so on. So I'm not suggesting, by the way, that everybody should be able to build their own mathematical model of global warming, but it sure helps the global warming deniers that people have no sense of what a model is, what a mathematical model is, how a computer operates, and so on. And this notion of system understanding really maps into the challenges that we face today as citizens of the 21st century. I just want to say a few words about system appreciation, because there's lots of misconceptions about this idea. First of all, there are some theorists who say nobody except a very, very small layer of people will ever need to know how systems work. All the rest of us are just going to be condemned to do what they say. And that could be an outcome. It's up to us to try and not make it an outcome, but that could be an outcome of the way in which computers and mathematical models are completely ubiquitous. On the other hand, we've done some research, a substantial amount of research actually, which shows that just ordinary people need to understand the consequences of their actions in computer systems that drive their lives. So, for example, we went into motor car manufacturing, automobile manufacturing plants, and asked the workers there what they had to do that was in any way mathematical. And they were doing a surprising range of interpretive results that the computers were giving them, but in general had absolutely no idea whatsoever as to what a result meant, how a conglomerate, how could it be that a long-term trend emerged from random fluctuations?
We're a bit inspired to add this. We were inspired to add this because of the Thai presentation. Remember they talked about their factories, because this is exactly what we did. We went to factories and looked at the whole process of the manufacturing to see how, and we were actually working with shop floor workers in terms of how they saw the process of their manufacturing cycle.
And in fact, what we did was we learned what it is we built transparent models of the models they were already using. So a classic case, which we won't bother you with because we don't want to go into too much detail, but a classic case was a guy that had been working for 20 years on a machine that told him how thick a strip of material, 3 microns thick I think it was doing, and so on, and had absolutely no idea what would happen if he twiddled one knob compared to another, and so on. We actually came across a factory which was so upset that their workers had no concept of the system they were using, and they were competing with each other. So they would say things like, the night shift doesn't do very well because we fixed the knobs so that we could sabotage their output so that the day shift would do better than the night shift. Absolutely no idea that there was a system with rules that drove it. And in the end, what that factory did was it made a control panel full of dials and knobs and switches that didn't do anything at all. And a culture grew up that it was because of expertise. Okay, so you'd like me to hand over to you now, would you say? Can you put in a plug for our book while I do that?
5, 6 minutes.
Okay, go.
5 minutes, right, okay, well I'm going to be very quick. God, I just wanted to, you were supposed to ask that question.
Can constructionism and classrooms coexist?
And we have been working on a project now for 3 years, and I've now got 4 minutes to talk about it. But this isn't the end. And it's a big project. We're working with colleagues in Stanford Research Institute in the United States. But the point about this is I wanted really to show you some life in a London classroom. Because I've been a bit piqued by, I work very closely with maths teachers. I think you work as co-collaborators, and you can really learn together. So what this is constructionism. But we've done a lot more than just build the tools. We've actually done a lot of work with the teachers, designing, and it's all research-based. We try everything and we evaluate everything. It's not just a bright idea that we wake up with. And this is our model. We have a big idea that you test out. You have teacher professional development that you write up and you evaluate. We, in the end, have a replacement curriculum unit. Now so we actually devise the curriculum materials and the teaching materials. Now it's a script, but it's not a script that anybody follows. It actually gives you something that the teachers can work with, break up, debug, add to, but at least we've tried to make a sequence of 3 or 4 weeks lessons. And that has been an amazing challenge. I've never done it before. And so I say it's replacement, but they do what they like with it. And it's all been incredibly well evaluated. I have never in all my life been evaluated so much as in this project. And it's been very good, it works, but the it is all of it. It's the software, it's the materials, it's the teaching professional development. It is not one or any other, and that's always a danger. So I want to we're now working in 130 schools, and I just wanted to show a glimpse of one of our schools. And this is a school in East London. It's one of the most challenging areas in London, but of course now it's trendy since the London Olympics. But let me just show you this.
We are a non-selective school in the middle of East London, and Cornerstone Maths has been a huge success here.
I love the language that the kids are now using because of this. Some of the questions are quite challenging, but a lot of the children have really raised up to that challenge and are writing some excellent mathematics. One of the lessons, I decided just to hand out some post-it notes to see mainly what language they had understood and things they had learned. And nearly every single child in the room was able to tell me what a congruent shape was, with a very, very detailed explanation. So the fact that if all of them could do that, I think probably did exceed my expectation of that class.
It's a mixed ability challenge in school.
We used to use a portal sort of non-stop just to communicate.
Online
I've done activity 3. This is what I found. I did activity 6. It was really good, or try this instead. So it's a really good way to get ideas of how to maybe tackle different issues that you might find going through the unit.
Oh, you're on it, that's it. Perfect. Yeah, brilliant.
It's helped develop people's thinking and being able to actually have a deeper understanding of mathematics. And
I think we'll stop because we have that. But I wanted just to show a glimpse of this classroom. I think you can see it's very diverse. It's mixed ability. And the teachers are very passionate. Now, I'm not going to show this video, but I do think if you're doing anything in schools, or anything in any area in education, you have to bring the leaders along with you. And these are actually little videos of different leaders, different coming in, why they chose to work with us. For lots of different reasons. Some just tick the box because we're quite a prestigious institution, but some because they genuinely thought that the materials were transformative. And I think we just have to make sure that we bring them alongside. And, but in 2011 there's been a cultural shift, and we're going to romp through this because we want to just talk about our next project.
Okay, this is the final collection of slides, but just very quickly, Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google at the time, had dinner with our Prime Minister, David Cameron, and made a speech which included this observation. He made a big thing about the country that had more to do with the foundation of computing science, not teaching anything to children. And basically this was greeted by panic. The government immediately abolished the IT curriculum in primary schools. They said we've got to stop teaching Word, Excel and binary arithmetic, I guess, because everybody has to have binary arithmetic. Yeah. And this has given us a fantastic opportunity, which we're now going to outline and then end. Oh, I just must say, we had not heard of the school that you've just seen the video of when our project started. We hadn't heard of them. They are just a regular school in East London. And Brian, next time you're in London, you must come and visit. So, an outline. Celia, you're going to do this for us?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think you were just going to do the slide. I mean, basically,
No, you'll do this.
Okay. Basically, I think what we're trying to do in this project is that we think, because of working with all of you, we know a lot more than we did in the early 80s. How can we bring all this to bear on this project? The thing about the project now is that we're trying to do computational things when you're learning a computer language or learning stuff about the language, but we're also very interested in maths, and we don't apologise, this is our domain. Other people want to do other things. And in our country, mathematics is the thing you've got to learn. But also because of this new legislation, everybody is doing computational thinking in various different ways. There's a very complex relationship between those two things, and what we're going to see is whether we can actually, working with teachers and schools, find out what that complicated relationship is. And if Seymour saw us doing this, he would think this is terrible, because we are going to work in a randomized controlled trial.
Okay, so we've spent the whole of our professional lives saying that randomized controlled trials don't work in education. And this is our chance to say, sorry, but we think there's something special happening here. And that there is a possibility for gathering and analysing meaningful quantitative data which won't do us any harm at all. First of all, the first reason why it's different now is that programming is infrastructural. So we don't have to compare people who learn programming in Scratch with people who do nothing, or people who play football. The 1980s is full of these ridiculous studies where one group learns to program in Logo and the other group does absolutely nothing at all, goes home, and then surprisingly they learn a bit of Logo or they don't. We got to stop?
Thank you. Oh, I thought you said we had to stop.
Secondly, or thirdly on the slide, we really have a huge amount of research so that we know what to look for. And although we understand that quantitative results cannot possibly uncover causal mechanism, the fact that we know what to look for and we've identified what can happen when people have control over the computer is a great help. So we still need design experiments, but can we build them to complement trials? Celia, you have the last word.
I'm actually going to say that we're not apologising for this. I do think it's about time we as a big community do evaluate what children learn over a long period of time, and we have the opportunity. I'm not going to do that. No, we haven't got time. We haven't got time. We are not going to be technocentric. We are going to look at this combination of working with a very, very exciting programming language that's quite ubiquitous in our country, and we're going to devise teaching materials, and we are going to actually look at, first of all, computational thinking, and we are developing with our colleagues a measure of computational thinking, and then longitudinally we're going to take those same children, they're going to be a year older, and we are going to have a chance to follow up those Agelinas to see, well, what happens when they're actually using their computational thinking skills to program stuff to learn some maths. And ultimately that will be the test. There will be two measures. One, a measure of how they develop computational thinking, and the other, which will be how they get on in the maths test. And this is going to be challenging because the maths tests are dire, and we have no control over those because they are the national maths tests. We will do our best to try and model them. But that is the challenge. We know we've got to take into account a lot of things, not least gender, which has seemed to be forgotten a lot in talking about computational thinking. And what we want to say, we've got randomized control, and we hope to tell you all about it in Thailand at the next Constructionism. By then we will either be deeply miserable because everything's been a failure, or else we will be absolutely elated because we'll be able to share our journey. The actual results of the test will only be the tiny thing that's interesting. What we're going to do is lots of qualitative study in those classrooms with those kids. What actually is the difference? We'll predict it will be the way the teachers work with the kids. But all the teachers will be working with us. We're going to try and build an online community, which I don't think we've ever quite succeeded yet, and that's what we'll try and do.
I don't have time to say it, but I'll put a slide on the screen that I'll leave you to read. Thank you very much. I am going backwards because you wouldn't let me show it. Good. Okay, thank you.
Well, we're elated right now. And I'm sorry that we only have 5 minutes for questions, but listen, go and have coffee with these guys.